Ever feel like you're stuck between a rock and a hard place? Needing closure, like you really need to move on from something, but the thought of actually explaining yourself just makes you cringe.
Oh, totally. It's like this weird limbo.
Yeah, exactly. Like you want that clean break, but without the whole emotional drama of explaining everything.
Definitely. And you know what? I think this piece we're diving into today really gets that. It's all about how to navigate that need for closure, but with grace and without those dreaded conversations.
Yeah, it's not always easy to find that balance. And this deep dive we're doing today, it's all based on this one really insightful article I found. Before we even get into like the how-tos of finding closure without over-explaining, I feel like we need to back up a sec.
Okay, back it up.
Because what even is closure? Because it's so personal, right? It's not a one-size-fits-all thing.
Absolutely. I think the article hit the nail on the head with this. It's like before you even think about talking to the other person, you got to figure out what closure actually means to you in this specific situation.
That's so important because what brings me that sense of closure might be totally different from what you need.
Totally different.
Yeah.
So it's all about really understanding your emotional needs in this specific situation. Like the article asks some really good questions. Is closure about finding peace for you? Is it about finally feeling heard? Or is it just being able to move on knowing you stayed true to yourself?
I love those questions. It's like a little self-reflection moment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like what will truly let you step forward without that baggage?
When I think back on times when I craved closure, what I often really wanted was just to feel validated. Like if the other person just understood my perspective, then I could finally be free.
That's so common. But this piece is challenging that whole idea.
Yeah.
It's saying we got to honor our emotional limits and that we're not actually obligated to explain ourselves,
It's like that expectation that we have to justify every decision almost, like especially when it comes to relationships.
right? And that's where this whole idea of boundaries comes in. It's crucial. You got to protect your own energy first. You have the right to choose what you share and who you share it with.
It's funny because it's almost like we've been conditioned to over-explain, to kind of seek approval.
Yeah, and this article even suggests this reframing question. I love this. It's like, if I didn't have to justify myself at all, how would I express my needs in this situation?
Whoa, that's a powerful question.
It is. It really gets you thinking.
Because it forces you to cut through all that external noise and get to the heart of what you actually need to heal.
Yeah, it shifts the focus from trying to please everyone else to actually empowering yourself. And that's so key when it comes to communicating your decision.
So let's say you figured out what closure means to you, and you're ready to move on. Even if you're not planning this big, long explanation, you might still need to communicate your decision somehow. And I love how the article gives us these actual phrases we can use. They're clear and concise, but also respectful.
Yeah.
Like, I've given this a lot of thought, and I feel it's best to move on. I hope you can understand, but I don't think further discussions will change this decision.
It's brilliant because it just shuts down the possibility of this whole back and forth. You're not opening it up for debate. You're just stating your decision and making it clear that it's final.
It's so direct, but not harsh or aggressive.
Yeah, it's just calmly stating your truth.
There's another one that I really like, too. It says, this is a decision I've made for my well-being, and I'd like to move forward without revisiting the past.
So good. Short, sweet, and to the point.
And what I love about these phrases is that they're not about convincing the other person. It's about putting yourself first.
Honoring your own needs.
Exactly. But what happens when the other person just doesn't accept that?
Us. The dreaded pushback.
Yeah, like when they demand more of an explanation than you're willing to give.
Well, that's where we get into this whole idea of guarding your energy. You simply do not owe anyone more than you're comfortable giving.
So true. It's easy to get sucked into those cycles of defending yourself or trying to get them to see your side.
Totally. But you have the right to disengage from a conversation that's no longer serving you.
It's about recognizing that sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself is just to walk away.
Sometimes that's the only way to actually find peace. Even when you're like gracefully exiting those conversations, it can still be tough emotionally. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
That's why I think this next part of the article is so interesting. It talks about how to actually find support and strengthen yourself emotionally. When you're going through all of this.
I was drawn to that too, because even though you're like setting boundaries with the other person, It doesn't mean you don't need your own support system.
Exactly. It's like acknowledging that this is still a process you're going through.
Yeah.
And you might need some help.
Totally, because you're still dealing with all these complicated feelings, even when you know it's the right decision to move on.
Right, like maybe you feel guilty, or
Uh-huh.
maybe you're scared that you haven't done enough.
It's so easy to get caught up in those thoughts.
And the article suggests, different practices that can really help, like prayer, meditation, journaling.
I love that. It's like creating your own emotional toolkit.
Exactly. And it's about giving yourself permission to actually feel those things
Yeah.
instead of trying to rush through them.
I'm so guilty of that. Like, I just want to get to the other side, to the closure part without sitting with the yucky stuff.
But sometimes you got to go through it to get to the other side.
Right. The only way out is through.
Exactly. And the source even gives you like specific examples,
Yeah.
like a prayer asking for guidance to stand firm in your decision, but to still show grace to the other person.
Or praying for release from that guilt or fear that might be holding you back.
Powerful stuff.
Because sometimes, even when you know it's not healthy to stay in a situation, there's still that feeling of obligation.
Or that maybe you're letting the other person down.
Yeah, it can be hard to shake those feelings.
It's like carrying around all this extra weight.
Yeah.
But prayer, meditation, journaling, these can all help you lighten that load.
I love that visual, lightening the load. And the article also talks about visualization too, right?
Right.
Like actually picturing yourself letting go of the situation, the need for validation from the other person.
Visualization is so powerful, it can really shift your mindset.
It is, because if you can see it in your mind, then it's easier for your body and your emotions to follow.
It makes it feel more real.
It's interesting because, we often think of closure as something that needs to happen externally, like we need that conversation or apology from the other person.
Oh, I know.
But this piece is saying that real closure is actually an inside job.
It is. It's about deciding for yourself to move on, even if the other person doesn't get it.
Wow, that's huge. It means your sense of peace doesn't depend on them.
Ex-
The article has this affirmation that really drives this point home. It says, I release the need for others to validate my choices. I trust myself to know what's best for me.
So good.
It's all about reclaiming your power.
It really is. You are the expert on your own life.
Okay, so let's recap for a sec. It seems like this whole idea of seeking closure without all the explanations is really about a few things, right? Like recognizing that closure is a deeply personal journey.
Yes, definitely.
It's about figuring out what you need, setting boundaries, and then taking care of yourself emotionally along the way.
And realizing that you don't need the other person's permission to move on.
You don't need that perfectly tied up bow.
You can find peace on your own terms.
This has been such a thought-provoking deep dive.
Okay.
But before we wrap things up, I want to leave our listeners with one final question. So knowing that closure is this personal thing, what feels like the most empowering way for you to find it in your own situation? Like, what can you do starting today to honor your needs and move forward, with grace and clarity?
Yeah, it's a great
Oh,
question.
maybe it's journaling about all those messy emotions, or trying those visualization techniques to really see yourself letting go.
I think those can be really helpful.
Or maybe it's just choosing to not engage in conversations that drain you anymore.
It's funny, isn't it? Like we often try to find closure by trying to control the other person, like trying to get them to see things our way or apologize.
Because we're looking for their validation.
Exactly. But the real power comes when we shift that focus inward, like asking,
Yes.
what can I do to heal and move on, regardless of what they do?
Powerful stuff.
It is.
It's like we're finally giving ourselves permission to let go of that need for external validation.
And that could be incredibly liberating.
So freeing. Like we're saying, my peace of mind is not dependent on you understanding.
And that's where trusting your gut comes in,
Mm.
because you already know deep down what's best for you.
It's like we all have that inner compass.
This article is just reminding you to listen to it and then to have the courage to act on it.
It's like that quote, sometimes you have to let go to see if there was anything worth holding on to. And sometimes the answer is no.
And sometimes letting go, even without all the answers or explanations, is the best thing you can do.
For yourself.
It's the most loving choice.
I love that. This has been such an insightful deep dive into finding closure on our own terms.
Without all the drama.
Exactly. And until next time, I hope everyone remembers to prioritize their well-being and to trust that inner wisdom we all have.
I got this.
We'll see you on the next deep dive.